Earlier today, the January 6th committee heard from the former president's daughter, Ivanka Trump herself, who was actually at the White House during the January 6th riot. She voluntarily appeared remotely in a meeting that lasted roughly 8 hours. That is less than a week after investigators interviewed her husband, Jared Kushner. But the details of those conversations are still unknown.
I mean, she's answering questions. I mean, you know, not in a broad, chatty term, but she's answering questions.
Has she broken the fifth?
Not that I'm aware of.
Or any other privilege for that matter, executive privilege?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's really valuable when we have the opportunity to, ask questions of people who were in the room on that day.
Chair Benny Thompson said afterwards that she was a cooperative witness, and in that sense, she exemplifies the vast majority of the people who we have contacted, who've come before the committee. Essentially, people are cooperating.
Back with us to discuss, Katie Benner, Justice Department reporter for the New York Times, and former friend and advisor to Melania Trump, Stephanie Winston Wolkoff. Welcome to you both. Stephanie wrote the book, Melania and Me, The Rise and Fall of My Friendship with the First Lady. Katie, who knows what Jared said last week? Who knows what Ivanka said today? But the fact that the former president's senior advisors and family members did not invoke privilege, they did not take the fifth, as far as we know, and they spoke for 14 hours total, that's a giant story. We have never seen that before. So what do we know about what happened?
Listen, I'm not going to be able to say what happened in the room. I think that's to be seen. And when the committee writes its report, we'll have a really full accounting of what happened in that room. So I think it's probably unwise to guess too much. But what we do know is the committee said that she was forthcoming and that she did not dodge questions. She answered questions to the best of her ability. And what both she and her husband can do is fill in blanks if they so choose, because a lot of people were contacting them both leading up to January 6th and during the riot, contacting them asking for help both to stop and overturn the election, for help in stopping the plot to overturn the election, and on the day, January 6th, to help, imploring Ivanka Trump to please tell her father, to tell the rioters to go home. So they would have an accounting of what people were saying to them and what they said back. And for Ivanka Trump, she'd be able to say what she thinks was going on in her father's head. Now, keep in mind, just because somebody spends a lot of time with the committee does not mean that all questions would be answered. I think a great example of that is Jeff Rosen, the former Deputy Attorney General. He spent a lot of time with the committee, but when you read through the full transcript of his testimony, which has been put online, you can see that there were a lot of questions that he really just felt he could not answer, and he stuck within the tight parameters of exactly what he felt that he knew, leaving the committee still searching for information.
To the best of her ability. That's what I keep finding myself underlining, Stephanie. You know Jared and Ivanka very well. And let's be honest, they have been on a PR tour since the day Trump took office, trying to convince the world that they're the good guys inside, softening his edges, tempering him from what he could really do. But we didn't see 1 ounce of evidence of that, besides Ivanka's own team on a constant loop leaking to all of us how good she was on the inside. Do you believe that what we saw today is just an extension of that PR tour?
I think Ivanka is in the moment right now trying to whitewash her past, and which will, again, it's not possible. She and Jared know exactly, they were toe to toe with Donald. And being inside and watching the manipulation, the deception, the pure ability for her to control the situation, how she wanted it to play out, and for the rest of all of you, the press, to hear about it, was something she did on a daily basis. They've got their bases covered. They didn't do this lightly, Jared and Ivanka. They know exactly what they're doing. And I think what this is going to lead to is many of the people that have not shown up and have not spoken up. Donald, Ivanka, and Jared, and the rest of the family know that they're putting everyone else in a really, really difficult position. They've got to show up and answer questions.
Could this be, though, the first we see Jared and Ivanka breaking from Trump, not turning on him, But they don't necessarily need him anymore. They don't need to be his human shields. You have not seen Ivanka speaking at rallies, going on Fox News since he left office like her brothers do. They are quietly leading a very, very wealthy life in Florida, while Jared takes all of those international contacts he made while they were in office, and he's raising money.
Well, he is. And again, many of those other people that were in the White House as advisors, as well as people that weren't tied to the White House but were in the private section, really know that Jared right now is getting away with so much more than they've been allowed to. I mean, that's going to come and bite him.
He's smarter than they are.
I think that many of these people have connected Jared and Ivanka to the people that they need to be connected to. I mean, Ivanka with her trademarks, Jared with his, billion-dollar finances. The international community, as well as the foreign influence that played its role throughout the entire presidency, as well as the planning of the presidential inauguration, is something that I think we all have to take into account. And I'd be really interested to see and hear what they may have said or not said.
I, for one, am very, very interested. Katie, go bigger picture. What does this say about where the committee's investigation is headed?
Sure. I want to pick up on Stephanie's point, which was very good. This is it's a coup for the committee. Even if Jared and Ivanka weren't particularly fulsome in their answers, even if they didn't give them a lot of information they didn't already have, it is something that they can hold up and say, even the president's own daughter and son-in-law have come in to speak with us. So there's really no reason you shouldn't. Nobody was closer to Trump than these two. So in that way, it's really good for the committee as they go forward and try to get witnesses not only to speak privately, but as they prepare to bring us to open testimony, public testimony in the coming months.
8 hours of testimony, as careful as one may be, you could slip up.